Let's do it.
All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday, July 11th, Slurpee Day. My name is Albert. I am the founder of Albert's List, and I'll be your host today. And you are here for how to network to your next career opportunity. And with me as my co-host is Andrea Velasquez, aka the Millennial Career Coach, longtime friend of Albert's List, and here today to talk about how to network to your next career opportunity, which is especially topical given the competitive nature of today's job market with everybody sending in their job applications through applicant tracking systems and attempting to get the attention of hiring managers in ways that may not necessarily get the attention that they want and so forth. Being a strategic networker is more important than ever. And we're going to talk about that today. And Andrea is here to talk about that and to give you tips, tricks, and also share with you our upcoming 4-week boot camp where we're going to show you how to become a great networker and apply those skills in a live environment. Without further ado, Andrea, over to you.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Albert. It's always nice to do these events with you. So yeah, welcome everybody. And, and for those of you who are just joining in, I'm just going to kick it off here. How I like to introduce networking is more or less, how to successfully talk to strangers to get you more work. What we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give you a little bit more of an introduction about myself. Number one. Number two, why you should network in the first place. So a couple of compelling stats and figures. Number three, ground rules and expectations to know and be familiar with as you start networking. Four, how I was able to establish myself. So I'm not just going to talk the talk. I'm going to show you how I walk the walk and how you can do it too. And then last but not least, to actually networking. And like Albert mentioned before, but I will say it again, stick around till the very end, please, because we have the special offer for you for our boot camp. Now, a little bit about me. So, have to clarify the name. Velasquez is my married name. My maiden name is Misir. I've been a marketer for 13 years. Some of the brands that I've worked on included Sprint. I slung banner ads for Sprint for a year and a half. It was fun, and I could say I did it, but I don't want to continue doing it. And I didn't. Also worked on campaigns for Johnson & Johnson, P&G, and Showtime. I've also spent 5 years working at some of the largest privately held healthcare companies based in the Bronx, including during the pandemic. I have stories about that. Some of my expertise was featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, all online, Nerd Wallet, Fast Company. Little facts about me as coach. I've actually some of the more recent clients that I've had, their total salary increase was a little over $500,000. I've logged in easily over 4,000 coaching hours since I started career coaching, and I've worked with over 1,000 clients and mentees. Some of the companies that hired my clients are Disney, Capgemini, Etsy, Moody, Fisher, and Cisco. And when I'm not doing career stuff, you will see me reading a book. So one book that I like to recommend to people, especially like when I'm coaching, is Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept where you find an intersection between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you get paid for. The world part would be, if you're trying to get to that like tippy top part of as those hierarchy of needs. Um, Also been trying to go to the gym at least 2 times a week. Got a little bit of muscle going on. I've also been organizing monthly meetups because I spend way too much time on Reddit. I'm pretty active on the Stanford subreddit where I've been living for about a year and a half, and I literally just had a meetup yesterday where we on average get like about 20 people just to, make friends and have fun. And yeah, I am a huge gamer, and I recently went down the Final Fantasy 14 rabbit hole because the Dawn Trail came out. So the little disclaimer for just like nerd segment here. I started off as a black mage, then I had to switch as a monk. And then I realized like, oh, summoner is actually probably the best DPS class so far. Let me switch to summoner. And by the time I head up to Dawn Trail, I'm probably gonna switch again. So FYI, if there's anybody that wants to play with me, that's my name, and that's the server that I'm in, and that's my little character, who I think kind of looks like me minus the monocle part. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's talk about why we're here. Let me run you through some very fast facts about networking. So according to this handy dandy infographic, 61% professionals said that networking has led to more jobs. 73% of those professionals have been hired via their connections. 61% have also found jobs via weak tie relationships, meaning that, it's going to be a certain level of separation. It might not necessarily be somebody that is in your immediate circle, but they're going to know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. Oh, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, since I would, we know how important it is. That's why we signed up for this. So that's out of the way. Wait. But before we get into it, I cannot stress enough this slide. If I had to guess, and please sound off in the comments, some of your frustrations around networking is that you feel like you might be just throwing stuff to the wall and hoping that it sticks. You want to strike a balance between the quality of your network and the quantity. So you do need to make sure that you have a decent amount. So you can have a handful of connections, but you still need to keep going so that you increase your chances of getting some kind of work lined up. Because after all, 100 close connections is going to be way better than connecting to 1,000 strangers. Oh, what's really important, there are these 4 rules here. Well, technically 5, including quality and quantity. You have to be politely persistent. You can't just do a one and done. As Ariana just mentioned in the chat, sustaining relationships is going to be really important. So you got to check in with your people from time to time. Most people do want to help. Every once in a while, you could very well come across some, excuse my language, some real asshole that might not want to help you at all. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the people that do want to help, but bandwidth is going to be limited. Very few people would be able to really drop what they're doing right away and get you something. So it's really important to just follow up and check in from time to time. Don't beat yourself up though when it comes to that. Obviously, life is going to happen to everybody involved. Let's say you talked to somebody last week and you said, "Oh yeah, let's follow up another week or so." Week or so passes. Don't and I'm sure we might have some people pleasers or some people they'll just be like, "Oh no, I forgot to follow up with this person. I'm terrible." And then you might have that guilt gnaw away at you so that you're not going to follow up with them again. It's totally fine. You can send out a genuine apology. "Hey, I know we said that we were going to catch up in another week, but couldn't get to. I'm so sorry. Let's pencil something in the next month or so." A month or so is usually fine, especially if you enjoy talking to that person. It's good to check in every once in a while. But of course, there's going to be some folks that will say no, or like I was mentioning earlier, some of the assholes from before. If they say no, or if they're not going to be the most helpful to you, you cannot take that personally. You're going to have to keep trucking. So going back to point 1 with being politely persistent. And also, and we're not going to get into this because I know Albert has done so many workshops around this topic, and B, we are feeling it personally as we go through the search. But please, I cannot stress enough, and it's worth mentioning again, that it's not you. It's not going to be just you. It is very much the market that we're in. This is arguably the worst job market we've had since the Great Recession. Profits have not been higher, but there have been way more firing than hiring happening, according to layoffs.fyi. In just the tech sector, 360 tech companies have laid off over 100,000 people we just got into the second half of this year. It's insane. And of course, thanks, Albert. Thanks for letting us know that more layoffs are happening. So this number is already out of date. Isn't that fun? And of course, hiring has been on a steady decline since last year. The spike was right in the middle of COVID, which made sense. Like, that was a pretty good time for job seekers. And then it bottomed out at the end of 2021, peaked up again throughout 2022, and it's been on the decline ever since. There's still going to be a little bit of peaks and valleys. We won't get to a job market like we did during the height of the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that this is going to be it. Every single job market operates on peaks and valleys. Nobody can say definitively when things are going to get better. I personally think that things will definitely be better after the election. Of course, not everybody can afford to wait until a new president is elected um, for us to get work lined up. So we still got to do what we can. Be that as it may, we obviously can't just be like, okay, we can't slowly blame the economy for what's going on. Hence why we need to develop a network. So, how we develop a network, we first have to start with establishing ourselves as a professional. So, I will use myself as an example. I'm going to go into a little bit of my history as a marketer and how I was able to establish at least my marketing persona and how I've been able to leverage that. So, started off, graduated a couple years after the Great Recession with my bachelor's degree, and then I jumped headfirst into my career in ad tech when I was working with those big brands. So, ad tech, media, freelance, just really all about basically like my 20s was just hustling. And then, of course, you know, instability happens for anybody that's been in the advertising media world. There's so much volatility in that space. And I've been part of layoffs, which led to me having a legit quarter life crisis, which lasted for a while. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I actually got my TEFL certificate during the summer of that year. And I thought that I was going to go to Peru to teach English as a second language, but my mom talked me out of it. But it's okay. It took me some time, but I ended up entering healthcare from 2016 and I stayed until 2021, which again, pandemic happened. So definitely a learning experience, that's for sure. But I took advantage of the hot job market, and those 2 years where I was able to make the most money that I've ever made throughout my professional career. But then last year, as the hot market started to cool down, things took a bit of a turn. And that's when I leaned more into the career coaching side of things. And also, I'm a firm believer, not just with all the other crazy stuff happening this year, but I am a firm believer that this year particularly could be having a lot of people are going to be having much needed transformation. So what I was able to do with my story as a marketer was focusing in on my wins and just letting my personality shine. There was a lot of moments, especially when I was younger. Um, I didn't want to come across as like too unprofessional. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers or think, oh my God, I don't want people to not take me seriously or not see a lot of the experience that I've had to offer. Oh yeah. TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. You're actually correct. um, but at the end of the day, people want to work with fellow humans. And when I was able to just show up more of my show who I am and just show more of myself, that led to just deeper relationships and conversations with others. So this is just a snapshot of some of the stuff, like just a little bit, as you can see, like who I am as a person, some of the things that you might find on LinkedIn, and every once in a while, a silly picture, very every once in a while. But the moral of the story is that you should not be afraid to be yourself and find those moments where you can combine some fun with professionalism, because people will always work with people. We are not going to be slaves to the robot revolution quite yet. And as the result of all of this, I'm contributing to a Bloomberg article. This was an inquiry from a reporter a couple months ago. I interviewed with her on a written piece, and I also went into their Midtown office in Manhattan to record a video. So that's pretty awesome. And as I mentioned earlier in my career, when I was doing a lot of freelancing, I had somebody reach out to me directly, and I was able to leverage that conversation into one of my favorite clients I've ever worked with. She was a jewelry designer. She had fabulous pieces. Still have some of those pieces, which is awesome. And then, keeping in touch with some old folks that I had great conversations with and got my pandemic healthcare marketing job when I just reconnected with the recruiter that I was working with at that company. So that was how I established myself. Here's some tips on how you can establish yourself. And you could think about some of the people that you follow. Here's some of my favorite people that I follow. Chris Rock is my favorite comedian of all time. He's unfiltered and hilarious. I don't really follow PewDiePie like that anymore. Well, he's not as funny, but when he first, like the height of his popularity, he just kept on screaming. And Jaden, as you can see, I'm a big YouTuber, and you know I'm a gamer. I really loved Jaden's animation style. So she created a presence. What these three people have in common is that they are very consistent with who they are. You see their name pop up, you know what you're gonna get. Now you might be asking yourself, I'm not an influencer and I have no aspiration or desire to become one. That's okay. Nobody will ever tell you that in order to network, you need to become some kind of influencer. You can establish yourself without going that influencer road and just posting all the time. You just need to be able to have something that you're known for. So think of your presence as your expertise, your knowledge, what you bring to the table as a professional is that cake. The personality is the frosting on top, and any other like fun things that you can mention is going to be sprinkles. So let me know if that makes sense. And here's just an examples of people just like you, including a couple of folks that I've worked with. She was one of my favorite mentees, and I love that she made a little like reference with her name, just like kind of playing around. Her name is Jack Riesling. Jack is short for Jacqueline, but she says in her headline that she's a jack of all trades. So it's super clever. They're not influencers, but they've been able to establish themselves online and master a LinkedIn game. They were able to grow their network. They've been able to show their personality and their expertise in how they've created their profiles and personas and featuring content that really showed that. And they've been able to show up as consistently as they can. So here's a breakdown of the components that would go into establishing your professional self. So first off is bragging about your big wins. Those are going to be, and that's going to be something that's going to be consistent wherever you're at in your job search as well. That's going to come up on your resume. That's going to come up in your interview. Probably come up as well as you get the next job, and then you can reference, well, this is how I did it in my previous job, and I was able to get a big result that way. Because when you lead with that, it's important that you feel confident enough that you can own that. So you can say that, yeah, I did this, and I could do it again. Any awards and honors that you've accumulated throughout your career? And the case studies, breaking down, especially if it is related to the big win, we can break down the background, what you've done, and the results of that, which I'm going to show you some examples. Being consistent, showing your consistent work. Recommendations, having other people sing songs of praise about you. Cheer squad, which I will elaborate a little bit further. Quantifiable results, so it kind of goes into big wins, but if you don't have anything that's a super big juicy win, you could still find other ways to quantify what you could bring to the table. And of course, personality. So here's a couple of examples of some big wins / results. You can say how many people you've hired and managed if you've been a people manager, how much money you've been able to bring to the organization. This is especially crucial for anybody that's in sales and marketing. And percentages. If you can't say, specific growth, then at least maybe there could be some time save, productivity, improvement, any way that you can assign a percentage to some kind of improvement there, especially if you're in process, QA, project management. That's going to be really juicy for a hiring team to see. And that could also be something that you could leverage as you're networking so that people can see like, oh, okay, you're a cool person to talk to and you know your stuff. Keep you in mind. And here's an example of a case study that I had put together when I had a short stint at Avalara. I'm not going to go into it too much. If you guys want to see it, I'm happy to share this along. And it's also on my personal website. So happy to post that in the comments if you want a little bit of inspiration. But, something pretty clean, straightforward, little graphic so that people can clearly see, okay, it's just another way that you can establish your expertise. All right. Oh, all right. Just wanted to take a moment to take a look at some of the questions here. If you have any other questions, feel free to, well, if you've asked any questions earlier, pop it back in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions so far. And if there's anything else coming up, just let me know. I think this might be like the big meat of the presentation so far, how to actually network. So in a previous slide, I had highlighted Cheer Squad. I cannot stress enough how important this is. And also, if anybody knows this, where this image came from, which movie this is, you get a bonus point if you pop that in the chat, and you might be alluding as to how old you're supposed to be. Yay! Yes, then that means we have more millennials here. Awesome. Good job, Jen and Ariana, for pointing out the movie. So the Cheer Squad is basically going to be your immediate circle. The people that know you the best and love you most. Obviously, positive people. Oh, friends, family, colleagues, classmates, neighbors. Even if they might not be directly connected to your space, your industry, like I personally haven't been able to, like, none of the people close by me were directly in marketing except like maybe one or two, but that wouldn't stop me from just telling them, like, hey, this is what's going on, need some help. Set up calls, catch up with them. And I cannot stress enough that you should not be afraid to just ask. You cannot build a network with just text. I know it could be really, really easy for us to just go back and forth, but we ultimately need to make sure that you are setting up that time to talk. Even if you can't meet up face to face, there's still that old school mentality that obviously that FaceTime is going to be ideal. A, we got so used to being on Zoom. B, it's obviously not going to be the most easy, but if you are able to set that up, that would be best. If not, the next best thing is going to be a video call. But what about stranger danger? I think this is especially for some of the younger folks that might be tuning in, and even some of the early professionals, the college students that I mentor. It's like, how do you even start? You are literally going to be asking, because at some point you are going to have to ask strangers for help. A couple ways that you can look into this is A, find a commonality that you can have a conversation, that you can start a conversation with. I know this might be a little unconventional, but even trauma bonding, there's a lot of stuff that you could talk about, especially if you are in the middle of or you are surviving a toxic environment. This screenshot, I had to take a screenshot of this when I was working at I don't want to say the name, but when I was in a media company, I hadn't even talked to this person yet, but he saw that I had joined the company, and then he sent me a LinkedIn connection request. I didn't even say anything to him. The first thing he said to me was, good luck over there. When I worked for that company, it was run like a chicken with its head cut off. I still check it with him every once in a while, but when I ultimately left that company, we had lots to talk about. So it's like you get to compare notes. So even then you can find some things to talk about. If you can't use a company as a commonality, then you can talk a little bit about the industry itself. And you don't want to rely on just a trite icebreaker. I think everybody at some point got some sort of spammy kind of connection message saying, we have so much in common. I want to connect with like-minded people. And then 9 times out of 10, it could end up being like a cold pitch anyway. So it's definitely not ideal for networking. You want to be able to be as personal as possible to at least break the ice somehow. Come in, any like real commonality that you can have a conversation with, not just mutual connections, unless it's going to be somebody that you actually know. Oh, college life, industry. What would make it even better is seeing what they talk about and being part of that conversation. So this screenshot here, I sent a connection request, or rather, no. I didn't send a request. She did. She posted something about the pay gap that Black women receive, and I chimed in, and she sent a request. This was somebody that I was following for a while, but we were never personally connected on LinkedIn. So I was like, yeah, your posts really resonate with me. And it's so cool to actually connect. So it's I got to be like have a little bit of cloud nine moment because I'm like, ooh, a LinkedIn celebrity of sorts connected with me. That's awesome. So even having something like that where you can have like inject a little bit more personality and just get to know the human behind the profile could go a long way. But, obviously making the connection with somebody is half the battle. Now we have to make sure that the connection is strong. So, one thing that you could do is obviously, like, I'm assuming a good amount of people here are actively looking for work in some fashion. You can still be of service, like, keep asking the questions. What are some things that you need help with right now? Here are some things that I'm looking for, but here could also be the ways that I could help you out in the meantime. One conversation is going to plant the seed, but of course, for anybody that knows about planting, I don't have a green thumb, but everybody knows that, okay, you have to plant the seed, but then you have to keep watering it until it eventually bears fruit. And that's where the follow up comes in. So, this screenshot, let me give you a little bit of background. This guy, Paul, I was connected with for years. And we were just like having every once in a while, we just chime in and be LinkedIn buddies. And we've mentioned before the pandemic that we wanted to have a coffee chat, but we never got the chance to meet up in real life, especially because he's in Jersey City and I was living in the Bronx. And there was just no way that I was going to cross a bridge to drive over there, and he was living too far to go into the city. So that never happened. But then pandemic happened. We got to catch up again. We were both in healthcare at a certain point, and we were thinking about, we wanted to talk a little bit more about mutual companies. I reached out to him not that long ago, and I was like, wait a minute. Well, I see you popped up on my LinkedIn. It's good to see you again virtually. We never had a chance to set up that coffee chat. Let's catch up. Caught up with him a couple months ago. And then when he reached out to me right before Memorial Day, asked me, hey, I got an email from a recruiter for VP of marketing job. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's see how that happens. And I was able to talk to that recruiter. That was pretty cool. um, oh my God, that's true. So Albert had to sound off. I'd be remiss not to bring up this crucial networking moment with how Albert and I got acquainted. We've been connected for many, many years and immediately bonded over our love for helping others. I am totally paraphrasing here. And also just, being overall marketing nerds. Um, he's gotten to know me quite personally to the fact that, and I'm gonna post this in our next webinar, so we have the next batch of people, but also for anybody that's gonna work with us continually, we'll just get to know a little bit more about our friendship. He was at my wedding last year, so he got to see how I personally changed my last name. Ah, yeah, I digress. There's so many different ways that you can have connection, but what's really important is just making sure that you maintain those relationships because you never know what could happen down the road. And that's the beautiful thing when you're able to just keep the connection going and find ways to collaborate, just like how Albert and I are doing right now. Yeah. Final reminders. Consistency and persistence will pay off. It's going to take some time, but you don't give up. And you want to be able to just keep talking to folks, keep being of service. You have to be really situational though. I would say though, because you're going to have a lot of you're probably you especially with the resources that are available in so many different ways, especially with Albert's group. There's content there. There's different scripts that you can use. It is going to take some trial and error for you to find the sweet spot. And again, you need to be able to test it out. So I was a little bit wary about putting in exact messaging in this presentation, at least, because I think it would be best to just get to know what that person is going through so that you could kind of respond to a strike when the iron's hot. You can still send out some introductory messages. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do, what I can do right now, I can just deviate for a little bit and pop up an example of another community, which if you haven't joined, I recommend joining. There's a ton of Slack groups out there. As you can see, I'm a member of quite a few of them. And some of these groups, if they're well maintained, they'll have threads where you can put intros in. You can just introduce yourself to other people. There could be a connection like Trover, for instance, where you put your bio in, and then the bot will just message you to other people. And I highly recommend doing something like this, maybe even signing up for Lunch Club, just so that you can, for lack of a better term, just practice the human part of sending out, like just connecting with others. You obviously do want to be able to strike a balance between kind of like getting to the point, because not everybody is going to, not everybody might have time to just shoot the shit with a random stranger. So just say like, okay, this is what the thing I'm looking for, but here's what I have to offer. Would love to see if we have some commonalities. They'll respond to you or they won't. So it is going to be a science experiment that we would basically be doing. Okay. I'm gonna pop back into my presentation here. And also I cannot stress enough this last part. If you don't feel like networking at all, if you don't feel like being a people person, it's okay to just disconnect, step away from the computer, play Final Fantasy if you want, and then hop back into the swing of things on the next day. So now you might be asking yourself, I need more help. What else can we do? Well, Albert and I are working on a networking boot camp that's going to start on July 25th. So that's 2 weeks from now. So we're going to have a smaller group of people in this where we will help you. We will be able to have more time to personally help you establish your professional self, make sure that you're showing up and best marketing yourself as professionally as possible, helping you determine who the right people are that you should connect with, recruiters, hiring managers, second degree connections, potential colleagues. And we're also going to be crafting messages. So there's a couple of comments in here asking about Slack groups. That specific Slack group I highlighted is called Rev Genius. They're more for like RevOps and sales folks, but there's so many other Slack groups that you can join as well. Most of them are for free. So I would totally recommend like just doing a quick Google search and seeing what kind of communities are there. That's how I was able to find this, some of the ones that I've joined. And obviously kind of saying, okay, which one has a sizable amount of people in there, which one seems to be pretty active with talking, because you don't want to end up being in a Slack group and then post something and then nobody responds to you after a while. Before a networking bootcamp. So not only will I help you best market yourself, help you find the right people, at that point, I will be able to help you craft some more messages, especially say if you have your eyes on, if you have a dream company, if you have a dream job that you're really, really trying to get, this is a great opportunity for us to work together so that I can make sure that you're showing up as best as possible and that you're very meaningful and proactive with the messaging that you're saying so that you'll be able to get your foot in the door. And then there's going to be even more resources that we can share, including a more robust directory of some of the other groups that you could join. We do have a few early bird seats that are still left at $227, and then the price is going to go up. So if you want to sign up for that, Albert just posted a comment in the chat. And then, of course, if you need even more help, if you'd like to work with me in a deeper capacity outside of networking, I am working on a more robust career coaching program that will not only go over networking in LinkedIn, but job search planning, resume revamp, interview prep, and an overall confidence and mindset boost. I can only take on 15 people at a time. If you're able to scan the QR code, and I'll also pop a link in the chat where you can sign up for my newsletter, where I will be posting more information about that opportunity. So that about does it for the presentation. I'm going to post a link in the chat, and I think like we have about 20 more minutes so we can talk more. I saw we had quite a few questions, and I apologize that I couldn't get to all of them during the course of the presentation, but now let's answer some questions.
All right, let's go through some questions. What are your thoughts on the Open to Work LinkedIn banner?
You know, I feel like from a data perspective, because I always like to look at it from a numerical perspective to see if that actually works. We don't have, so the short answer is that we don't have any definitive data to show whether or not that's actually helped people get more work. But ultimately, it's up to personal preference. There's a lot of really crappy recruiters that will say like, "Oh, it looks so desperate. I don't want to work with desperate people," when it's just another way for people to know that you're looking for work. So I would say if you feel comfortable enough to put that out there, by all means do so. I don't think in LinkedIn, I haven't been able to find, because I was looking for this. I haven't been able to find like any definitive and um robust research showing that it has actually helped somebody get a job quicker versus them not showing the banner and just doing what they do normally on LinkedIn.
Awesome. What's a good subject line when messaging someone on LinkedIn?
So definitely not what I was. So I'll tell you what's not a good subject line would be the more generic one saying looking to connect, da da da. I would see if you can make it as personal as possible. I don't recommend using an in-mail on LinkedIn because LinkedIn actually has a completely separate folder for in-mails. So they'll actually filter out that you might not be able to get an in-mail right away. And most of the people that typically get a ton of in-mails anyway they're almost always conditioned for it to be like a spam or an unwarranted sales pitch. So I recommend, if you're going to be using LinkedIn more, which of course I'm going to be biased and say that you should, always go for the connection request, because LinkedIn prioritizes, like the whole point of LinkedIn is to make connection. So they're going to want people to just connect with others more. And you're more likely to have a notification for a connection request versus an in-mail.
All right. I have over 700 contacts, most of whom I know personally. How can I maintain these connections? It's not like I can blast out a group message to all of them.
And it's funny, at a certain point you actually could. I don't think LinkedIn has that option, because you could have actually gone into your settings and exported the email addresses for everybody. At that point, what I would do, and that's something, Albert, that we would absolutely go over in our boot camp. It is going to be a little bit of homework, but I do advise taking some time and really kind of creating that degree of separation. So even though you have 700 connections, nobody in this world would say that they're close to 700 people. We're going to have to rank them a little bit. Rank them based off of how well they know you, how well they would advocate and be a champion for you, but also people with how well they're connected, how much influence do you think they'd be able to hold if they were in a position to refer you somewhere. So we could actually create a list and give them a little bit of weight based off of how strong they could be and how much you could leverage them as in a professional networking sense to try and get more work.
Can you cover again the Slack channels that you recommend that folks join?
Yeah. So one is Rev Genius. We'll tap that in there.
And are these groups for marketers, job seekers in general? What are we looking at here?
I think like there's definitely, so Slack is just one resource. There's also Discord. Um Discord, I actually joined a couple as well. There's one for wait, I have to look this up real quick. Career Flow. Yeah, and then I think there's another one for Fang jobs. Well, you definitely will create a more curated list. But I do recommend looking at Google. Like I again, because like my background is in marketing, I'm going to have more bias towards some of the marketing groups. But I was also in, and this is for anybody that's going to be like in a major city, which I think a good amount of us are. Like I'm a member of some New York City based groups, not just like on Slack, but also on Facebook. There's a couple of NYC tech groups, for instance. I'm sure there would have to be some Bay Area equivalents or like Los Angeles equivalents as well. I'm also a member of Hue. Hue is a nonprofit. They're headquartered in New York, so there's a lot of fellow New Yorkers there. But Hue is a community of people of color in advertising. Yep. So that's like a couple of tips that I could give you, but we could definitely go into a little bit more detail in the boot
Yeah.
camp.
Yep. And so let's talk a little bit about that boot camp. I see a couple more questions coming in, and I wanted to just highlight that a little bit more. So like, what are the particular topics that you want to cover over these 4 weeks that we'll be teaching, and what are some of the outcomes that the folks who are joining will achieve at the end of those 4 weeks? Because one of the great things is it starts July 25th. It ends just before Labor Day, just before the what I like to call the fall hiring season. And so what will people be
Yeah.
looking for? And I'll share the link again to the boot camp here.
Mhm. So what I want to cover in the boot camp would be refining and establishing your online identity. So especially for people that just they don't know how to best represent themselves, this is a great way for us to really go over that so that I can just go into a little bit more detail as to, all right, let's take a look at some of the things that you can highlight from your career, a little bit of your personality so that you stand out from the crowd, helping you determine the right people to connect with, some little tips and tricks that you can use to really see. And of course, for people that already have a network, we're going to be one of the things that I really want to incorporate in this boot camp is going to be that level of accountability. So it's not just going to be us just sharing a deck. We're going to work with you on this. So you'll have homework, but at least this way we'll be able to, you'll be able to have something that you can take away. We'll also have more time and bandwidth to help you craft specific messages that you can use for whoever you're going to be connecting with. This is especially great if anybody has their eye on a target job, like a dream job at a dream company, and more like detailed resources with additional groups, additional job boards, other ways that you can network. We'll also set aside some time so we can practice doing some ice breaking stuff. So especially for anybody that might have a little semblance of being socially awkward, I want to create a safe space where we can just practice what we're going to be saying. And then that obviously can translate into online messaging as well.
Yep. All right. Let's see. How can we use in real life networks like BNI, university alumni networks, fraternities, and other associations to network? What are some boundaries to recognize in doing so? And what are your thoughts on BNI? And what would you recommend? What are some particular organizations that you would recommend?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I haven't heard BNI in a minute. I
I
don't
know
know. Yeah. I
it's like
don't
your
think they
local
do a
Rotary
good
Club, you
job.
know?
Right, because and it's funny you say that because just like the Rotary Club, I don't think they do a really good job recruiting like younger Gen X, millennials, and especially not Gen Z. And it's probably because there's a hefty price tag to join. But at the same time, you would also know that there's some pretty established professionals that you can go in to network with. So I would say one angle that you could approach would be a knowledge seeking angle. You want to go in to learn, and people love talking about themselves. So you could say, like, oh, I know that you're a leader in your industry. I actually attended a BNI meeting literally a decade ago. I didn't join this chapter. I went in as a sub for a fellow career coach. This BNI chapter was a block away from Grand Central. And what's wild, just wild little tangent story here. I was not only the only woman of color, but the only millennial in that room. Everybody else was an older white man. I'm like, oh my God. But then again, I don't know, they probably were living around that area.
Yeah, I
So,
would say that things like BNI are very much your older school networking organizations. My beef against those kinds of things is that they're very limited in what they allow. So like I think if you're like a marketing professional, BNI will only allow one marketing person. So if you're late to the party, then they won't let you in. But if you're the first person in, then it makes a nice stream of potential leads for you.
yeah.
Overall,
So
I recommend looking at associations within your career field and so forth. And so, um, you definitely want to get as specific as possible. I spent a lot of my early career doing very broad networking events. And so that led to meeting a lot of people in a lot of different areas, but it also didn't really benefit in terms of focusing straight down on my career.
yeah, it's tough with professional memberships. You really need to take a look at before you commit to any money, look at their programming, look at their event schedule. They need to be really consistent with that. And they also, you need to be able to have a good idea as to how many people would actually show up at these things. You could also consider, if you have the time and bandwidth, volunteering at an event. I actually volunteered when I was having my quarter life crisis. I
Mhm.
volunteered at WomenCon, and I was able to meet a couple of really cool people that I still talk to this day.
Yep. When does the fall hiring season start? I would say after Labor Day.
We got a little less than 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Judy asked, when did LinkedIn start limiting connection requests, personalized messages? I was connecting with others during a conference, and they say that 4 left for the week. Yeah, that's the sucky part when LinkedIn was kind of doing this before Microsoft acquired them, but now it's even more worse because they're like, okay, give us more money. The good news is that it's not that expensive to get LinkedIn Premium. If their plans start at $40 a month. But they also give you a 30-day free trial. So I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of that. Unfortunately, at this point, there's no workaround around that limitation. So you will eventually have to purchase LinkedIn if you're going to be really, really ramping up your networking game on LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right. I'm a digital marketer. Do you know any sites or groups I can join for professional networking events and to stay up to date? I'm looking to upskill and do a refresher. Do you know any good institute I can look into?
I should know this off the top of my head. I will say this for any free certs and just making sure that you're up to date
HubSpot.
with your knowledge. Cannot recommend HubSpot enough. HubSpot, Salesforce has some stuff. Google specifically, like they're for their Google products.
Google for
LinkedIn
digital
also
marketers.
has,
Hmm.
yeah, LinkedIn Learning, not so much, but if you're going to be using LinkedIn more on like the advertising and marketing side, they have LinkedIn Marketing Labs as well. And for communities, like I said, I mentioned Hugh. Let's see who else. There's also another group called We Are Rosie, but I can't recommend them really. Just because I personally haven't been able to find any marketing work from there. Their job board is pretty nuts, but the community is really nice. Because at the end of the day, you want to find not just from a professional side, but are there going to be good people that you would like to work with that you can just have a drama-free conversation with? Especially as a marketer, we have stories. Um, but yeah, I would recommend, and even I'm in a couple of Facebook groups. One is called Women in Marketing. They have like 90,000 members on Facebook. So you can check them out too.
Well, okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions about our boot camp? We want to help you. We want to help you become a better networker. We want to help you not make networking a bad word and help you become better as we head towards the fall hiring season here. Asking for a friend. Where would a good networking group for product manager be? Be. Look up the Silicon Valley Product Management Association. Women in product is another one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you've got things like product school and so forth.
And then while we have a little bit more time, so in addition to the networking boot camp, if you need a little bit more help, I am working on a more robust career coaching program as well. So you can scan that real quick, and I'll also pop the link in the chat so you can sign up to my newsletter for more information.
All right. Well, wonderful. If there are no more questions, I know you have Andrea's newsletter here. We will look forward to seeing you soon in the boot camp. And we'll be also doing a replay of this next week where you can come back and learn even more about networking. I'll be following up with a recording, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.